The fluorescent lights of the Sterling Technologies boardroom cast sharp shadows across 20 faces, but only one man stood at the center of their collective fury. Jamal Thompson adjusted the cuff of his tailored charcoal suit, still foreign after 9 months of wearing construction boots, and met Robert Chambers' glare with the same steady calm that had carried him through worse rooms than this. Chambers slammed both palms on the mahogany table hard enough to rattle water glasses. "This is outrageous. A construction worker running a $50 million foundation?" The words hung in the air like accusations. Jamal let the silence stretch, counting 3 full seconds before responding. His voice came out level, each syllable measured. "Former construction foreman. Current Chief Community Officer of Sterling Technologies." Victoria Sterling rose from her seat at the head of the table, her presence commanding the room without effort. The same charcoal suit she'd worn that first night, though now it carried different weight. Authority earned rather than inherited. "Mr. Thompson has helped 847 families in 9 months. That's more measurable impact than this board has achieved in 30 years of quarterly reports." A tablet appeared in front of each board member, screens illuminating with data. Retention rates, community engagement metrics, brand reputation analysis. Numbers that spoke louder than the protests forming on aging lips. Chambers' face had gone the particular shade of red that comes from watching control slip away in real time. "You're destroying shareholder value with this charity obsession." Victoria's expression didn't shift. "Some values aren't measured in stock price, Robert." Jamal caught the slight tremor in her jaw, the only tell she was as nervous as he was. 9 months of partnership had taught him to read the micro-expressions beneath her boardroom armor. He stepped forward, drawing fire away from her. "It started 9 months ago, when your restaurant partner humiliated my daughter at Westbrook." The room erupted in overlapping voices, but Jamal was already moving toward the door, Victoria a half step behind. The last thing he heard before the heavy oak swung shut was Chambers shouting about emergency votes and fiduciary duty, and all the corporate language that meant fear dressed in business casual. The hallway stretched empty and quiet. Victoria exhaled slowly, leaning against the wall. "That went well." Jamal almost smiled. "Define well." "We're not fired yet." Yet being the operative word. She straightened, the vulnerability vanishing as quickly as it had appeared. "Let me show you something." They walked to her office in silence, past cubicles where junior analysts pretended not to watch. The corner office overlooked Boston Harbor, glass walls offering no privacy but unlimited view. Victoria pulled a worn photo from her desk drawer, creased at the edges, faded with time. A woman in a simple blue dress, smile bright despite the exhaustion visible in her eyes. "My mother, 27 years old in this picture. 3 years before she died cleaning offices in buildings she'd never be allowed to enter during business hours." Jamal studied the photo, recognized something in the woman's expression. The same quiet dignity he'd seen in his own mother's face. In Aisha's, those final months when the cancer left her too weak to hide the pain. "She would be proud of you." "Would she?" Victoria set the photo down carefully. "I spent 20 years building exactly what she warned me against. Power without purpose. Success measured in zeros on a balance sheet. You changed. We changed me." She met his eyes. "You and Zara. That night at Westbrook." The memory pulled him back before he could stop it. 9 months dissolving into yesterday. the boardroom fading into marble floors and crystal chandeliers, and his daughter's small voice saying the words that broke everything open. 9 months earlier. The foreclosure notice sat on Jamal's kitchen counter like a living thing, demanding attention through sheer gravitational pull. $3,847. 60 days until proceedings began. The numbers had burned themselves into his mind weeks ago, but he still found himself staring at them every morning, searching for solutions that refused to materialize. Zara's footsteps echoed down the narrow staircase of their Dorchester row house, the particular rhythm that meant she was trying to be quiet and failing completely. 8 years old and still hadn't mastered the concept of stealth. Jamal folded the notice quickly, sliding it beneath a stack of unopened bills. She appeared in the doorway wearing the pale blue dress Aisha had sewn 3 birthdays ago, when the cancer was still something they thought they could beat. The fabric had faded from countless washings, hem let out twice to keep pace with growing legs, but Zara wore it like armor. Her fingers found the clay pendant hanging around her neck, the one she'd made in art class last spring. Brave spelled out in crooked letters, painted in colors that had chipped and faded but never quite disappeared. "How do I look, Daddy?" Jamal's chest tightened in the way it always did when she smiled, with that gap where her front tooth used to be. Like the most beautiful girl in Boston. "You have to say that. You're my dad." Doesn't make it less true. She spun once, the dress flaring out, then froze. "You're wearing the nice jacket." He glanced down at his department store blazer, the one he saved for job interviews that never materialized, and parent-teacher conferences where teachers spoke in careful code about potential and circumstances beyond control. The fabric had worn thin at the elbows, but from a distance it passed for professional. Special occasion requires special effort. Zara's smile stretched wider, revealing the gap. Best birthday ever. 3 months of savings. Every spare dollar from his construction foreman position, every tip from late-night shifts bussing tables at O'Malley's. $247 for one dinner at a restaurant where people like them weren't supposed to exist. But Aisha had made him promise during those final weeks, give Zara normal childhood moments. Don't let poverty steal her joy the way cancer stole her mother. The 3 alarm clocks on his dresser upstairs told their own story. Construction site at 6 a.m. Janitorial shift at 11 p.m. Weekend handyman jobs whenever calls came through. Sleep happened in fragments, dreams interrupted by the sound of his phone's job hunting apps pinging with positions that required experience he couldn't afford to gain. Zara practiced her table manners while they waited for the bus, reciting the rules Jamal had taught her. Napkin in lap, small bites, no elbows on table. She made a game of it, testing herself, correcting her posture with exaggerated formality that made him smile despite the weight pressing down on his shoulders. The subway from Dorchester to Back Bay took 40 minutes and 3 transfers. They sat near the back, Zara pressed against the window, narrating the city as it slid past. She pointed out buildings under construction, asking questions about steel frameworks and concrete reinforcement that revealed she'd been listening when he talked about his work. Smart kid. Too smart for her own good sometimes. A woman in expensive athletic wear moved seats when they sat down. Subtle shift that Zara noticed but didn't comment on. She'd learned young that some things weren't worth questioning. The knowledge sat heavy in Jamal's gut, the understanding that his daughter already knew how to make herself smaller in spaces that didn't want her. "Daddy, why did that lady move?" So much for not questioning. Jamal kept his voice light. "She probably just needed more space, baby." "Oh." Zara returned to the window, but her hand found his, fingers squeezing tight. The Back Bay streets gleamed with wealth, that seemed to reflect off the very pavement. Boutique storefronts displayed single handbags that cost more than his monthly mortgage payment. Valets in pristine uniforms opened car doors for people who'd never considered the possibility of taking public transportation. Jamal's construction-trained eye cataloged code violations in the historic brownstones, improper fire exits, structural modifications that would never pass inspection. But he kept the observations to himself. Different rules for different tax brackets. Westbrook Restaurant rose before them like a cathedral to excess. Golden light spilled from floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating marble columns and brass fixtures that probably cost more than his truck. The name itself was etched in elegant script above double doors that gleamed like they'd been polished within the last hour. Zara stopped walking, staring up at the building. It's so fancy. We belong here just as much as anyone else. Jamal heard the lie in his own voice, but he forced his shoulders back, remembering lessons his mother had taught him 40 years ago. Dignity doesn't depend on the numbers in your bank account. The interior stole his breath despite every preparation. Crystal chandeliers refracted light into rainbow patterns across white tablecloths. Piano music drifted from somewhere unseen, classical piece he half recognized from a documentary Zara had watched about composers. The other diners wore clothes that probably cost more than he made in a month. Conversations hushed to the particular volume that suggested important business conducted over wine that cost more per bottle than his weekly grocery budget. The hostess stand commanded the entrance like a checkpoint. The young woman behind it, Melissa, according to her nameplate, performed a visual assessment so quick most people wouldn't have caught it. But Jamal had spent 38 years learning to read the micro-expressions of judgment. Her eyes tracked from his shoes to his collar and back, cataloging every thread that announced his tax bracket. Her smile never wavered, professional training overriding whatever conclusions she'd drawn. Good evening. How may I help you? Reservation for Thompson, 7:30. Melissa's fingers moved across her tablet screen, scrolling through names with a kind of deliberate slowness that suggested she already knew what answer she'd give. Thompson, let me see here. More scrolling. The pause stretched long enough to pull focus from nearby tables. I see. Unfortunately, sir, it appears that table has been given away. The words arrived with practiced regret, as if the computer system itself had made an unfortunate error beyond human control. Jamal felt his jaw tighten, forced it to relax. There must be some mistake. I confirmed this morning. A system error, perhaps? Melissa's tone had cooled several degrees, professional courtesy giving way to something harder. We're fully committed this evening. Perhaps a more casual establishment would better suit your needs. The suggestion landed like a physical blow, coded language wrapping discrimination in customer service. Zara's hand tightened in his, her 8-year-old understanding catching what wasn't being said. A man appeared beside Melissa, emerging from some back office with the kind of timing that suggested he'd been watching. His nameplate read, Stephen Crawford, manager. Silver hair slicked back, $1,000 suit, smile that never reached his eyes. Is there a problem? Jamal kept his voice level, aware of the attention now focused on them from surrounding tables. There seems to be some confusion about our reservation. Stephen folded his hands in front of him, posture suggesting patience he clearly didn't feel. Well, Westbrook maintains certain standards, Mr. Thompson. A dress code policy. I'm afraid your attire doesn't quite meet our requirements. Jamal looked down at his pressed shirt, his cleaned jacket, the tie he'd practiced knotting in the mirror. Everything he owned that could pass for formal. I wasn't informed of any dress code when I made the reservation. It's understood. Stephen's voice carried the weight of unquestioned authority. Westbrook serves a particular clientele. We maintain certain expectations. Laughter rippled from a nearby table, pointed and deliberate. A man in an expensive suit leaned toward his companion, voice pitched just loud enough to carry. "This isn't a place for people like that." A phone emerged from someone's hand, angled in their direction. Jamal felt heat rising in his face, the familiar cocktail of shame and rage he'd spent decades learning to swallow. He'd faced this before, the subtle and not so subtle reminders of boundaries he wasn't supposed to cross. Usually he let it slide, focused on getting through the day and getting home to Zara. But tonight was different. Tonight was for his daughter, for the promise he'd made to Aisha, for the childhood moments that were supposed to be normal and joyful instead of lessons in systematic exclusion. Zara's voice cut through the rising noise, small and clear and absolutely devastating. "It's okay, Daddy. We can leave." The words stopped everything. Jamal looked down at his daughter, 8 years old, gap-toothed smile gone, eyes too understanding for someone who should still believe the world was fair. She clutched her brave pendant with white knuckles. "We can have mac and cheese at home." "I like mac and cheese." Something broke inside Jamal's chest. His 8-year-old daughter was trying to protect him, to comfort him, to make his humiliation easier to bear by pretending she preferred boxed pasta to the birthday dinner he'd promised her. Children shouldn't have to carry their parents' shame. Shouldn't have to learn at 8 years old how to make themselves smaller to fit into spaces designed to exclude them. He nodded, throat too tight for words, turned toward the door, one hand on Zara's shoulder, determined to salvage something from the wreckage of the evening. Maybe the diner 3 blocks over would have room. The food wouldn't be fancy, but at least they'd be treated with basic human dignity. They'd taken exactly 2 steps when a sound cut through the restaurant's ambient murmur. The sharp scrape of a chair against marble, loud enough to silence even the piano player. Every head turned toward the source. At a VIP table near the floor-to-ceiling windows, a woman had risen to her feet. Tall, commanding presence wrapped in a tailored charcoal suit that probably cost more than Jamal's truck. Dark hair pulled back in an elegant bun that suggested control extending to every detail. She moved between tables with the confidence of someone who'd never questioned her right to occupy space. Victoria Sterling. Even Jamal recognized her, though their worlds existed in different galaxies. The tech entrepreneur who'd built Sterling Technologies into an $8.4 billion empire before turning 35. Business magazines called her the Ice Queen of Silicon Valley, ran profiles analyzing her acquisition strategies and competitive ruthlessness. Her face appeared on financial news segments discussing market disruptions and quarterly earnings that shifted entire sectors. She stopped directly in front of Stephen, close enough that he had to look up to meet her eyes. "What's happening here?" Her voice carried the particular kind of calm that suggested violence held in check. Stephen's expression shifted from smug satisfaction to sudden wariness, social calculus recalculating in real time. "Miss Sterling, we were just explaining our policies to these guests." "What policies?" Victoria let the question hang in the air, weighted with judgment. Stephen straightened, reaching for professional composure. "Our dress code, the reservation system. We maintain certain standards." "I'm wearing a suit." Victoria's interruption was surgical. "This gentleman is wearing clean, pressed clothing. His daughter is wearing a lovely dress for her birthday." She looked from Stephen to Jamal and Zara, then back. "What specifically is the problem?" The restaurant had gone utterly silent. Even the background noise of silverware against china had ceased. Stephen cleared his throat, searching for words that wouldn't sound as damning as his thoughts. We maintain a certain atmosphere for our guests, a level of sophistication. That atmosphere. Victoria repeated the word like she was testing a foreign concept. You mean you judge people by their bank accounts instead of their character? Stephen's face flushed. Miss Sterling, I assure you our policies are applied consistently. Cancel my reservation. The interruption landed like a physical blow. Melissa's fingers froze on her tablet. I'm sorry, what? You heard me. Victoria turned to Jamal and Zara, crouching slightly to meet the 8-year-old at eye level. What's your name, sweetheart? Zara's voice came out barely above a whisper. Zara? That's a beautiful name. Is today your birthday? Zara nodded, fingers still clutching the brave pendant. Victoria straightened, returning her attention to Stephen with the kind of focus that suggested decisions being made in real time. Set up a table for 3. Your best table. Stephen's eyes widened. 3? Yes, I'll be dining with Mr. She paused, looking to Jamal. Thompson. Jamal Thompson. With Mr. Thompson and his daughter. Victoria's tone made it clear this wasn't a request subject to negotiation or restaurant policy. Now. The transformation happened with stunning speed. A table materialized in the center of the dining room, previously occupied by a reserved sign that vanished into a hostess's pocket. Waiters who'd pretended not to see Jamal and Zara suddenly appeared with water glasses and bread baskets and menus presented with flourishes that suggested they'd always intended such service. Some diners looked embarrassed, the earlier laughter dying on faces that now avoided eye contact. Others gathered their belongings in pointed protest, making their displeasure known through loud sighs and deliberately slow departures. A few remained frozen, watching the drama unfold with the kind of fascination usually reserved for traffic accidents. Zara sat between them, wide-eyed and silent, her hand finding Jamal's under the table. Victoria ordered without consulting the menu, rattling off dishes that probably cost more than he made in a week. Lobster thermidor, Wagyu beef, truffle risotto. Names he recognized from cooking shows watched during late-night insomnia, but had never expected to encounter in real life. The first course arrived before Jamal found his voice. Ms. Sterling, this is very generous, but we can't accept. You can, and you will. Her tone left no room for argument. It's a birthday celebration. Those shouldn't be ruined by small-minded people. Zara's natural curiosity overcame her shyness. Do you like birthdays, Ms. Victoria? Something shifted in Victoria's expression, the boardroom armor developing hairline cracks. I do, though I don't celebrate them much these days. That's sad. Zara delivered the observation with 8-year-old directness, unfiltered by adult social calculation. Birthdays are the best days. Perhaps you're right. Victoria's smile reached her eyes for the first time, transforming her face from intimidating to almost human. What do you usually do on your birthday, Zara? As Zara launched into an enthusiastic description of past celebrations, ice cream cake, soccer games with friends, the science museum trip where she got to touch a real meteorite, Jamal studied their unexpected dinner companion. Up close, Victoria looked younger than her business photo suggested. Early 30s, maybe. The shadows beneath her eyes spoke of long hours and heavy responsibilities. Her suit was immaculate, hair perfect, makeup flawless, but something in her manner suggested isolation beneath the polished surface, like she'd built walls so high she'd forgotten how to find the door. Conversation flowed more naturally than seemed possible given the circumstances. Victoria proved surprisingly easy to talk with, drawing Zara out with questions about school and friends, showing genuine interest rather than adult condescension. When Zara mentioned her love of soccer, Victoria revealed she'd played competitively through college. What position? Zara's eyes lit up with the particular enthusiasm reserved for finding unexpected common ground. Midfielder. You? Me too! Zara bounced slightly in her seat. Coach says I'm getting really good. I scored 2 goals last week. That's impressive. Keep practicing and you could play in college like I did. The conversation continued through multiple courses, Victoria treating Zara's observations with the same seriousness she probably gave to board meetings. Jamal found himself relaxing despite the surreal nature of their situation. Whatever Victoria's motives, she'd rescued his daughter's birthday from disaster. That was enough for now. Then Zara asked the question that changed everything. Do you have a mommy, Miss Victoria? Jamal winced, opening his mouth to deflect, but Victoria raised a hand. It's fine. She set down her fork, silent for a long moment that stretched uncomfortable. When she spoke again, her voice had lost its boardroom polish. I did have a mother. She died when I was young. About your age, actually. Zara's expression went solemn. Like my mom? Yes. We didn't have much money back then. My father left when I was a baby, so it was just us. Mom worked 3 jobs to keep us fed. She listed the jobs like a catalog of exhaustion. Cleaning offices at night, waitressing during the day, sewing alterations on weekends. The kind of grinding poverty that wore bodies down to nothing, sacrificing present health for future possibility. One night she wanted to do something special. It was my 7th birthday. Victoria's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. She'd saved for months to take me to a nice restaurant. Not this nice, but nicer than we were used to. We got dressed in our best clothes. She wore this blue dress she'd made herself. The parallel hit Jamal like a physical force. Zara in her faded blue dress, Aisha's last gift, worn for special occasions because it was all they had. The restaurant manager took one look at us and said we weren't welcome. Victoria's voice had gone flat, emotions locked down behind professional control. Said we didn't meet their standards. My mother tried to explain that she had a reservation, that she'd saved for this. He didn't care. He called security. The table had gone quiet. Even the ambient restaurant noise seemed to have faded, leaving just Victoria's words hanging in the air between them. As we were being escorted out, my mother bent down and whispered to me. Victoria looked directly at Zara, and something cracked in her carefully maintained composure. She said, "It's okay, honey. We can leave." The words landed like thunder. Zara's eyes went wide with recognition. She said what I said. Almost exactly. Victoria's voice had gone rough around the edges. And it broke my heart then, just like it broke your father's heart tonight. Because children shouldn't have to comfort their parents. They shouldn't have to pretend everything is okay when the world is being cruel. The vulnerability in her voice was raw and unexpected. Then, as if realizing she'd revealed too much, Victoria straightened, professional composure returning like armor sliding back into place. I made a promise that night. If I ever had power, if I ever had money, I would never let that happen to anyone else. I would never stand by and watch someone be humiliated for being poor. Her phone buzzed on the table, another in a series of messages she'd been ignoring throughout dinner. She glanced at it, then turned it face down. My mother died when I was 12, working the night shift, cleaning offices. Heart attack from exhaustion. The information arrived matter of fact, decades of grief compressed into clinical detail. Jamal recognized the technique. The same way he talked about Aisha's cancer. Keep it simple, keep it brief, don't let the emotion overwhelm the facts. After that, I was in foster care until I turned 18. Victoria's fingers traced the edge of her water glass. After college, I built my company from nothing. Every success, every milestone, I dedicated to her. But somewhere along the way, I forgot that promise I made. I became so focused on success, on power, that I stopped seeing people. Really seeing them. She looked at Zara, something softening in her expression. Until tonight. Until I heard those exact same words again. Zara studied Victoria for a moment with the particular intensity children bring to important decisions. Then she pulled a small notebook from her purse, the kind teachers gave out at the start of the school year, along with a stubby pencil worn down from heavy use. She bent over the paper, tongue caught between her teeth, drawing with fierce concentration. When she finished, she pushed the notebook across the table. The drawing showed 3 stick figures standing together, a tall woman in a suit, a man, a little girl between them holding both their hands. All 3 were smiling. Above them, in Zara's careful printing, the words, "New Friends." Victoria stared at the drawing for a long moment. Then she carefully tore the page from the notebook, folded it with precise creases, and tucked it into her jacket pocket. "May I keep this?" Zara nodded, pleased. "I'll make you more if you want." "I would like that very much." As dinner wound down, Jamal checked his phone. 9:40. Zara had school tomorrow, and he had a construction shift starting at 6 a.m. Victoria seemed to read his thoughts, already signaling for the check. "Let me drive you home." The protest formed automatically. "That's not necessary. We can take the subway." "I insist." Victoria's tone made it clear further argument would be futile. Outside, her driver waited with a sleek black Mercedes that probably cost more than Jamal's house. They settled into leather seats that smelled like new money, Zara's eyes already drooping with exhaustion. The emotional evening had clearly taken its toll. She leaned against Jamal's shoulder, fighting sleep with the determination of children who don't want to miss anything important. Victoria asked for his address. Jamal hesitated, then gave her the Dorchester location, the working-class neighborhood where gentrification hadn't yet driven rents beyond reach. She didn't comment, keeping her gaze on the passing city lights. As they drove, Victoria broke the silence. "I meant what I said in there. Your daughter reminded me of something important tonight." "What's that?" "That dignity should never depend on dollars. That we're all just people trying to make our way through this world. Some with advantages, some without, but all deserving of basic respect." The car pulled up in front of his row house, 2 stories, white with blue trim, small but well-maintained despite peeling paint and uneven porch steps. Through the kitchen window, the foreclosure notice was visible on the counter where he'd left it that morning. Jamal gently woke Zara. "We're home, Princess." As they exited the car, Victoria remained seated but rolled down her window. "Jamal, I have a proposition for you. A business proposition. Would you be willing to meet with me tomorrow?" Suspicion flared immediately. What could a billionaire tech CEO possibly want from a construction worker about to lose his home? "What kind of proposition?" "One that honors your wife's memory." Victoria paused, seeming to measure her next words carefully. "And my mother's. It's absolutely not charity. It's a partnership I think could benefit us both." After a long moment, Jamal nodded. "Where and when?" "My office." 1 p.m. She hesitated. "I can send a car. I can take the subway." Just give me the address." Victoria smiled, seeming to appreciate his independence. "Sterling Technologies, downtown, the glass building on State Street. Ask for me at reception." As the Mercedes pulled away, Jamal stood on the sidewalk, Zara's hand in his, watching the taillights disappear around the corner. The evening had started with humiliation and ended with mysteries he couldn't begin to unravel. What could Victoria Sterling possibly want from him? "I like her, Daddy." Zara's voice was thick with sleep. "She's like a princess, but stronger." "A warrior princess." Jamal smiled despite his confusion. "Yeah, like me." Inside, he tucked Zara into bed, pulling the covers up to her chin and kissing her forehead. She whispered, already half asleep, "Best birthday ever," before drifting off completely. Jamal sat at the kitchen table afterward, staring at the foreclosure notice. 2 months behind. 60 days until proceedings began. The construction job wasn't steady enough. The restaurant where he bussed tables had cut his hours. He'd been selling his tools one by one to make ends meet, the good ones his father had left him, each sale feeling like a small betrayal. Now this mysterious meeting tomorrow with one of the most powerful women in America. He should feel hopeful, but all he felt was wary. People like Victoria Sterling didn't just help people like him without expecting something in return. What could she possibly want? Across town, Victoria sat in her penthouse office on the 47th floor of Sterling Technologies. The city lights of Boston spread below like a carpet of stars. Familiar views she barely registered anymore. On her desk lay 2 items placed side by side. Zara's drawing of 3 stick figures holding hands, and the photograph she always kept nearby. Her mother in a simple blue dress, smiling despite the exhaustion evident in her eyes. Victoria opened her laptop and began searching, first for information about Jamal Thompson. Construction background. Volunteer work at a local community center despite his own struggles. Local news article from 2 years ago about single dad helping rebuild playground after vandalism. LinkedIn profile showing steady work history, skills in project management and team coordination. Property records confirming her suspicions about his mortgage situation. Then she researched Westbrook Restaurant more thoroughly, found other incidents cleverly disguised as policy, Yelp reviews from customers of color describing similar treatment, pattern of discrimination wrapped in coded language about standards in clientele and atmosphere. Her phone buzzed with a message from Robert Chambers, her board chairman. Decision needed on Hartwell merger by Friday. 4,000 jobs at stake. Numbers look good. Recommend proceeding. The proposed acquisition would increase shareholder value by 23% through strategic elimination of redundancies. Corporate speak for mass layoffs. 4,000 people losing their livelihoods so quarterly earnings could tick upward. The kind of deal she'd made dozens of times before, each one expanding her empire without regard for the human cost hidden in the spreadsheets. Victoria stared at the message, then at Zara's drawing, then at her mother's photograph. The 3 images formed a triangle of judgment, past and present colliding in ways she couldn't ignore. Her fingers moved across the keyboard. Exploring alternative strategy. Will present Friday. Trust me. The unfamiliar sensation in her chest took a moment to identify. Not ambition or determination, her usual driving forces. It was purpose. Real purpose, beyond profit margins and market share. For the first time since her mother died, Victoria Sterling felt like she was keeping her promise. Morning arrived with the mechanical insistence of 3 alarm clocks staggered across Jamal's bedroom. 5:30, 5:45, 6 o'clock. The construction site required his presence by 6:30, hard hat and steel-toed boots, and the pretense that last night hadn't happened, that he hadn't sat across from a billionaire discussing propositions he couldn't begin to understand. Zara was already awake when he checked her room, sitting cross-legged on her bed with the science textbook she'd been reading obsessively for weeks. Something about planets and gravitational fields and concepts that seemed too advanced for third grade. She looked up with that gap-toothed smile that still made his chest ache. "Morning, Daddy. Did you know Jupiter has 79 moons?" "I did not know that." Jamal leaned against the doorframe, grateful for the normalcy of her enthusiasm. "That's a lot of moons." "Yeah. Imagine having 79 birthdays every year." She closed the textbook carefully. "Is today the day you meet Ms. Victoria?" The question landed heavier than it should have. "This afternoon, after my shift." "What do you think she wants?" Jamal wished he had an answer that made sense. "I don't know, baby. But we'll find out." The construction site sprawled across 3 blocks of South Boston, steel framework rising from concrete foundations that would eventually become luxury condominiums. The kind of housing development that displaced the people who built it, replacing working-class families with young professionals who could afford $3,000 studio apartments. Jamal had long since stopped questioning the irony. Devin Carter, the site foreman, greeted him with a knowing grin that suggested the night's events had reached wider circulation than Jamal hoped. "Yo, Jay, you trending on Twitter with Victoria Sterling. What happened?" The other workers gathered around, curiosity evident in their stances. Phones emerged from pockets, screens displaying photos from Westbrook, Jamal and Zara mid-humiliation, Victoria's intervention, the 3 of them at dinner. Someone had captured the moment Zara pushed her drawing across the table. The internet had opinions about everything. Just a misunderstanding at a restaurant. Jamal reached for his hard hat, hoping work would end the conversation. Nothing to talk about. Devin laughed, genuinely incredulous. "Nothing? Man, you have dinner with the CEO of Sterling Technologies, and it's nothing? Come on. Details." "There's work to do, D. Let's focus on that." Throughout the morning, Jamal felt his phone vibrating with notifications he refused to check. Friends he hadn't spoken to in months suddenly interested in reconnecting. His landlord texting about the viral photos, wondering if this meant rent would arrive on time for once. His sister calling from Atlanta with questions wrapped in concern, wrapped in judgment about choices and priorities, and why he couldn't just accept help when it was offered. He turned the phone off completely during lunch break, seeking silence in the controlled chaos of power tools and shouted instructions and steel beams being hoisted into place. This was familiar territory. Problems with clear solutions, measurements that added up or didn't, structures that stood or fell based on principles he understood. At noon, he cleaned up as best he could, hand sanitizer from his truck, removing the worst of the grime, clean shirt pulled from the duffel bag he kept for emergencies, the construction site version of business casual. Devin watched him change with barely concealed amusement. "You really going to her office looking like that?" Jamal glanced down at his least-worn jeans, his button-up with only minor fraying at the collar. "It's what I have." "I know, brother, I know." Devin's expression shifted to something more serious. "Just be careful, yeah? People like that, they don't do favors without strings." The subway to downtown took 40 minutes and triggered the same awareness it always did. The subtle way other passengers created distance, chose different seats, clutched belongings a little tighter. Jamal had learned to read the microaggressions so precisely he could predict them 3 stops in advance. The woman with the designer purse who'd move when he sat, the businessman who'd stand rather than take the open seat beside him, the teenager who'd pull his backpack closer, like Jamal's presence suggested theft. Sterling Technologies occupied a gleaming 50-story glass tower that reflected the sky so perfectly it almost disappeared into the clouds, the kind of building that made statements about power and permanence. Lobbies spanning the length of a city block with marble floors and abstract sculptures that probably cost more than his annual income. The security desk required ID, visitor badge, elevator assignment. The guard processed him with professional neutrality that somehow felt more insulting than open hostility. At least hostility was honest. The elevator delivered him to the 17th floor, opening onto an open-plan workspace where dozens of employees pretended not to stare. The viral photos had clearly made the rounds. Jamal kept his eyes forward, following the assistant who'd appeared to escort him through the maze of cubicles and glass-walled conference rooms. Victoria's corner office commanded views of Boston Harbor, floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic evidence of success measured in altitude and square footage. She stood looking out at the water when he entered, motionless as a statue, silhouetted against the afternoon light. When she turned, the boardroom armor was fully in place. Tailored suit, perfect hair, expression that gave nothing away. "Jamal, thank you for coming." He sat in the chair she indicated, leather that probably cost more than his couch. The office held carefully curated details, awards on floating shelves, abstract art that matched the lobby aesthetic, technology embedded seamlessly into surfaces designed to impress, everything chosen to project competence and control. "I appreciate you making time." Victoria settled across from him at a small conference table rather than behind her imposing desk. Small gesture that might have meant nothing or everything. "I know you're a busy man." "Not as busy as you, I'd imagine." "Different kinds of busy." She allowed a slight smile. "I'll get straight to the point. After meeting you and Zara last night, I did some research." "I hope you don't mind." Tension crept up Jamal's spine. "What kind of research?" "Background. Your construction experience. The volunteer work at the Dorchester Community Center, despite your own circumstances." She slid a folder across the polished wood. "I also looked into your financial situation, the foreclosure notice on your home." Heat flooded Jamal's face, shame and anger mixing into something that tasted like copper. "That's private information." Victoria's voice remained gentle. "It's public record. I'm not trying to embarrass you, Jamal. Just the opposite." She opened the folder, revealing documents that laid bare his financial devastation with clinical precision. Mortgage statements, bank records, the foreclosure timeline that had been haunting his sleep for months. Seeing it all compiled and organized felt like being stripped naked under fluorescent lights. "I want to establish a foundation." Victoria's words cut through his spiraling humiliation. "The Aisha Thompson Foundation, named after your wife, if you'd permit it. Its purpose would be to help single parents who are struggling financially while raising their children alone." The proposal hit Jamal like physical force, knocking thoughts sideways. He stared at the folder without opening it further, searching for the trap he knew must exist. "And what would this have to do with me?" "I want you to run it." The absurdity of the statement should have made him laugh. Instead, his throat went tight. "What?" Victoria leaned forward, intensity replacing her corporate calm. "You have first-hand experience with the challenges. You understand the struggle in ways I never could, despite my own background. I can provide the funding, the resources, the connections, but you would be the heart of it, the authentic voice and vision." Jamal shook his head, mind refusing to process what she was offering. "I don't have any experience running a foundation. I swing hammers for a living. You're more than your job title. Victoria's certainty felt almost aggressive. You're someone who's navigated impossible circumstances with dignity and resilience. You've raised a remarkable daughter while working multiple jobs and facing financial ruin. You've maintained your humanity and compassion when many would have become bitter. That's exactly the perspective this foundation needs. The words should have felt like flattery. Instead, they felt like exposure, like she'd cataloged his pain and repackaged it as qualification. Why me? Why not hire professional charity people, folks with degrees and experience? Because they haven't lived it. Victoria's voice sharpened with conviction. They haven't had to choose between paying for electricity or buying school supplies. They haven't worked 3 jobs and still shown up for their child's school play. You have. She paused, letting the statement settle. This isn't charity, Jamal. It's a job, a real job with a real salary, benefits, and purpose. You'd be helping families like yours, families who just need support to get back on their feet. Jamal's construction-trained mind automatically started cataloging problems. I still have 60 days before foreclosure. Even if I accepted, that's not enough time to... Victoria pulled out her phone, typed something quickly. Consider it an advance on your first year's salary. I'll contact your bank this afternoon. Your home is safe. The casual way she dismissed his largest crisis felt surreal. Months of stress and sleepless nights solved with a phone call and bank transfer she'd barely have to think about. Jamal's pride warred with necessity, the familiar battle he'd been fighting since Aisha's medical bills started arriving faster than he could process them. That's charity. It's an investment in my foundation's future executive director. Victoria met his eyes without flinching. Can't have you distracted by housing concerns while we're trying to change the world. The statement hung between them, audacious in its scope. Changing the world. As if that was something people just decided to do over coffee and spreadsheets. But something in Victoria's expression suggested she meant it literally. That the same ruthlessness she'd applied to building her empire was being redirected toward demolishing systems that had crushed people like his mother, like Aisha, like him. There's something else. Victoria pulled out her phone again, showing him an email chain. I'm buying Westbrook Restaurant. Jamal blinked. You're what? Buying it and transforming it. New management, new policies, a place where everyone is welcome regardless of their financial status. A portion of the revenue will support the foundation. The scope of what she was proposing kept expanding beyond anything that made sense. Ms. Sterling, Victoria. Victoria, why are you doing all this? You don't know me. You don't owe me anything. Silence stretched while she seemed to weigh her response. When she spoke, vulnerability cracked through the professional veneer. When I heard Zara say those words, the exact same words my mother said to me, it was like hearing my own childhood echo across decades, a reminder of who I used to be, who I promised to be. She stood, walked to her desk, retrieved the framed photograph he'd seen the night before. Her mother in the blue dress, exhaustion and determination mixed in equal measure. She cleaned office buildings at night, including this very building long before I owned it. She worked herself to death trying to give me a better life. And somewhere along the way, I forgot. I became exactly the type of person she warned me against. Victoria set the photo on the table between them. Last night wasn't just about you and Zara. It was about me remembering my promise, about rediscovering my purpose beyond profit margins. Jamal studied the photograph, seeing parallels that hurt to recognize. Different circumstances, same grinding poverty. Different outcomes, same fundamental injustice. I still don't understand why me specifically. Call it fate or coincidence or timing. Victoria's smile carried sadness underneath. But I believe people come into our lives for reasons, even if those reasons aren't immediately clear. She gestured to the folder. Take this home. Read it. Talk to Zara if you want. The foundation will impact her life too. Whatever you decide, the offer stands. Jamal stood, tucking the folder under his arm. The weight of it felt heavier than the pages should have warranted. Thank you for the opportunity. I'll think about it. Victoria walked him to the door, pausing before opening it. One more thing. Whatever happened last night, meeting you and Zara, it changed something in me. For that alone, I'm grateful. As Jamal rode the elevator down, his phone buzzed insistently. He'd turned it back on after leaving the office, and now messages flooded in faster than he could process. But one stood out. Urgent notification from Zara's school. Zara involved in altercation with classmate. Please come as soon as possible. Fear spiked through his chest. Zara never got into trouble, never fought, never caused problems. He was already moving toward the subway before conscious thought caught up, folder clutched under his arm, Victoria's proposition temporarily forgotten in the face of immediate crisis. The principal's office at Zara's elementary school felt exactly as he remembered from his own childhood. Institutional furniture designed for discomfort, walls painted in colors meant to be calming but achieving only dullness. The particular smell of floor wax and anxiety that seemed universal to administrative spaces. Zara sat alone on a plastic chair, eyes red from crying, fingers clutching her brave pendant like it might actually protect her from whatever consequences were coming. When she saw Jamal, her face crumpled. He knelt beside her chair, keeping his voice low. What happened, baby? The story emerged in fragments between hiccuping breaths. Madison, her classmate, had been showing everyone the photos from Westbrook, passing her phone around during lunch, pointing at Jamal and Zara with commentary about charity cases and people who didn't belong in nice restaurants. The words had gotten meaner as the audience grew, Madison feeding off the attention until she'd announced loudly enough for half the cafeteria to hear that Jamal only got to talk to Victoria Sterling because she felt sorry for poor people. I told her to stop lying. Zara's voice dropped to barely audible. But she wouldn't stop, Daddy. She kept saying it over and over. That you were pathetic, and I was pathetic, and we should just stay where we belong. Jamal felt rage building in his chest, the kind that made his vision narrow and his hands shake. 8 years old, and already learning that success meant becoming a target, that visibility meant vulnerability, that trying to claim spaces she'd been told weren't hers would bring punishment disguised as social correction. Did you hit her? Zara shook her head violently. No, I just yelled, really loud, in the middle of the cafeteria. Mrs. Patterson said it was an emotional outburst. Principal Patterson entered on cue, carrying herself with the particular authority of women who'd spent decades managing children and knew exactly how to weaponize disappointment. Mr. Thompson, thank you for coming so quickly. Jamal straightened to his full height, letting his construction-built frame make its own statement. What happened? Mrs. Patterson settled behind her desk, creating physical distance that emphasized power dynamics. Several students were sharing social media posts about your encounter last night at Westbrook. Comments were made that upset Zara. She had what we'd call an emotional outburst in the cafeteria. The clinical language stripped humanity from the situation with surgical precision. Jamal's jaw tightened. An emotional outburst? You mean she defended herself against bullying? We take bullying very seriously, Mr. Thompson. Mrs. Patterson's tone suggested otherwise, The other student has also been disciplined. But we have protocols about disruption. My daughter isn't in trouble for standing up for herself. Jamal kept his voice level through sheer force of will. Zara, get your backpack. We're going home. Mr. Thompson, there's a process we need to follow. Send it in writing. Outside the school, Jamal crouched to Zara's level, hands on her shoulders. You did nothing wrong. Nothing. Those kids don't understand what happened last night. Zara wiped her eyes. Is it true what they're saying? That Ms. Victoria was just being nice to us because we're poor? The question cut deeper than the bullying, revealing the real wound underneath. Not just humiliation, but doubt. The possibility that kindness might be pity in disguise, that dignity might be charity wearing better clothes. No, she was being nice because she's a good person who saw others being mean. Just like you stand up for people, right? Zara nodded slowly, not quite convinced, but wanting to believe. They walked home together, Jamal having decided they both deserved the afternoon off. As they approached their street, he was surprised to see Victoria's black Mercedes parked outside their house. She stood on the sidewalk, looking uncharacteristically uncertain, professional armor showing cracks in the daylight. Victoria, the name felt strange on his tongue, too informal for someone who occupied such different economic atmosphere. Zara broke away and ran toward her with the uncomplicated enthusiasm of children who haven't yet learned to guard their affection. Victoria knelt to receive the hug, clearly surprised but not pulling away. I tried calling. Your phone was off. Victoria straightened as Jamal approached. I wanted to make sure you got home safely with the folder. And I realized I forgot to give you something. She reached into her bag and pulled out a business card, personal cell number written on the back in elegant script. In case you have questions about the proposal. Anytime, day or night. Her gaze shifted to Zara's tear-stained face, then back to Jamal with concern that seemed genuine. Is everything all right? School trouble. Jamal kept his voice neutral. Kids can be cruel sometimes. Understanding crossed Victoria's features, followed by something darker. About last night? Zara looked down at her shoes, hand finding Jamal's. Victoria's expression hardened with what looked like genuine regret. I'm so sorry. I should have considered the consequences. The social media attention, I didn't think. Not your fault. Jamal cut her off, surprised to find he meant it. Kids find any reason to be mean. Zara stood up for herself, though. Victoria crouched to Zara's level again. That's because you're brave. Just like your pendant says. The simple validation seemed to reach Zara in ways Jamal's reassurances hadn't. She touched the clay necklace, managing a small smile. Jamal made a decision that surprised him even as the words emerged. Would you like to come in? It's not fancy, but I can make coffee. Victoria's surprise mirrored his own. I'd like that very much. Inside, the contrast between their worlds became impossible to ignore. Worn furniture that predated Aisha's death, walls covered with Zara's artwork, crayon drawings and watercolor experiments, and the particular chaos of childhood creativity. Photos of happier times when the family had been whole, Aisha's smile captured in frozen moments that now existed only in frames and memory. The foreclosure notice still sat on the counter, visible reminder of crisis Victoria had offered to solve with a phone call. She pretended not to see it, the same way she pretended not to notice the patches in the couch fabric, or the dishes Jamal had washed by hand because the dishwasher had broken months ago and repair costs exceeded his emergency fund. While Jamal made coffee, the cheap kind from the discount grocery store, Nothing like whatever she probably drank in her penthouse office, Zara insisted on showing Victoria her room. Their voices drifted down the stairs, Zara's enthusiasm breaking through her earlier tears as she described books and toys and the science project she was planning about gravitational fields. They returned with Victoria wearing a plastic tiara from some long-ago birthday party, slightly crooked on her perfect hair. She looked simultaneously embarrassed and delighted, the contrast creating cognitive dissonance that made Jamal almost laugh. Princess Tea Party. Victoria adjusted the tiara self-consciously. Apparently, I've been coronated. They settled at the small kitchen table, coffee for the adults and hot chocolate for Zara. The foreclosure notice sat between them like an uninvited guest. Victoria's presence in his kitchen felt surreal. Billionaire CEO drinking discount coffee from mismatched mugs at a table that wobbled unless you folded cardboard under the short leg. Jamal broke the silence first. I've been thinking about your proposal. I have concerns. Victoria set down her mug, expression shifting to professional focus. I'd expect nothing less. What are they? He counted them off, construction worker directness cutting through social niceties. First, this feels fast. We just met last night. Second, I know nothing about running a foundation. And third, he paused, searching for words that wouldn't sound ungrateful. I worry about the optics. Rich woman rescues poor man. Makes both of us look like characters in a story instead of real people. Victoria removed the tiara carefully, setting it on the table like it deserved respect, despite being plastic and rhinestones. For the first, yes, it's vast. But some opportunities are time-sensitive. Your house situation creates urgency that can't be ignored. She met his eyes directly. For the second, you'd have support, training, a team. You wouldn't be doing this alone. And for the third, she paused. I understand that concern better than you might think. The press will spin whatever narrative gets the most attention. But we can control how we present this partnership if we're thoughtful about it. Zara looked up from her hot chocolate, question forming before Jamal could redirect. What's optics mean? How things look to other people. Jamal kept his explanation simple. Like how Madison thought Ms. Victoria was just being nice because we're poor? The parallel hit exactly where it hurt. Victoria leaned forward, engaging Zara with the same seriousness she probably brought to board meetings. Can I ask you something? When your dad helps someone, is it because he feels sorry for them, or because he thinks it's the right thing to do? Zara didn't hesitate. Because it's right. Daddy always says we help because we can, not because we have to. That's exactly how I feel too. Victoria turned back to Jamal. This foundation isn't about me saving you. It's about us saving others together. Equal partners with different strengths. The proposition still felt too large, too generous, too weighted with implications Jamal couldn't fully map. But something in Victoria's certainty suggested she'd thought this through more carefully than he had. I have conditions. Name them. Whatever this foundation becomes, it has to be real. Not a tax write-off, not a PR stunt. Something that actually helps people who need it. Victoria's response came without hesitation. Agreed. 100% agreed. And I need time with Zara. Jamal glanced at his daughter, who was listening with 8-year-old intensity. Regular hours, no galas or fancy events that take me away from her more than necessary. Completely reasonable. Victoria nodded. You set your own schedule, standard business hours, no weekends unless there's an emergency. She smiled at Zara. Your dad needs to be at your soccer games and school plays. That's non-negotiable. Zara beamed, previous tears forgotten. You can come too if you want. Victoria's expression softened in ways that suggested the offer meant more than Zara probably intended. I'd like that, if your dad doesn't mind. Jamal finally opened the folder Victoria had given him, scanning the contents properly for the first time. Proposed organizational structure, salary information that made his breath catch, $85,000 plus benefits, more than double what he made combining all 3 jobs. Mission statement that actually sounded like it might help people instead of just generating tax deductions. Everything meticulously prepared, suggesting Victoria had worked through the night, translating impulse into actionable plan. I need to sleep on it. Jamal closed the folder carefully. But I'm interested. Victoria contained her obvious pleasure, maintaining professional composure. Of course. Take all the time you need. My offer stands. As she prepared to leave, Zara gave her another hug, unself-conscious affection that made Victoria's eyes glisten slightly. At the door, she paused. Thank you. Not just for considering the offer, but for last night. For showing me what I'd forgotten. After she left, Jamal stood on the porch watching her car disappear. Zara pressed against his side, small hand finding his. Are you going to do it, Daddy? Help other families like us? The question assumed acceptance he hadn't fully committed to, but hearing it through Zara's perspective shifted something. This wasn't just about him, about his pride or his fears or his suspicion of motives. It was about the possibility that his years of struggle might translate into something meaningful for people still drowning in the same systems that had nearly destroyed him. I think I might be, baby. Would that be okay with you? Zara nodded enthusiastically. More than okay. Mama would be proud. The invocation of Aisha's name hit like it always did, grief mixing with gratitude that Zara still carried her mother's memory forward into her understanding of the world. Rachel would be proud had been one of Aisha's favorite phrases, her way of connecting daily choices to larger legacy. Hearing Zara echo it felt like permission granted across the boundary between living and dead. That night, after tucking Zara into bed with promises that tomorrow would be better, Jamal sat at the kitchen table reviewing the folder's contents more thoroughly. His phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. No pressure, but if you decide to accept, I've already contacted your bank about the foreclosure. Consider it an advance on your first year's salary. Either way, your home is safe. The message should have felt like relief. Instead, it triggered complicated gratitude mixed with resentment at needing rescue. Pride warring with pragmatism. The eternal struggle of accepting help when you'd spent a lifetime learning to ask for nothing. He typed back slowly. Thank you. I'll have an answer for you tomorrow. 3 dots pulsed, then disappeared, then reappeared. Finally, her response came through. Take your time. This is important. Get it right. Jamal set the phone down and stared at the foreclosure notice one last time. Then he picked it up, walked to the recycling bin, and threw it away with the decisive finality of burning bridges. Whether this was the stupidest decision he'd ever made, or the best opportunity that would ever come his way, remained unclear. But standing still had never solved problems, and Zara deserved better than watching her father drown slowly in systems designed to keep people like them underwater. Tomorrow he'd call Victoria and accept. Tonight, he'd let himself believe that sometimes help arrived wearing expensive suits and offering partnerships that seemed too good to be true, but might, just might, be exactly what they appeared to be. Across town, Victoria sat in her office long past the hour when security started their evening rounds. The viral photos from Westbrook had spread further than she'd anticipated, triggering responses that ranged from supportive to viciously critical. Her publicist had sent 17 messages about damage control. The board had scheduled an emergency meeting to discuss her erratic behavior. Robert Chambers had called 4 times, each voicemail progressively more threatening in its corporate language about fiduciary responsibility and shareholder concerns. She ignored all of it, focused instead on the email she was composing to her legal team. Draft documents for foundation establishment, fast-track the nonprofit status, prepare acquisition offer for Westbrook Restaurant and the entire Bennett Hospitality Group. If she was going to do this, she'd do it completely. Half measures had never been her style. The photograph of her mother watched from the desk corner, blue dress faded, but smile eternal. Victoria touched the frame gently. "I'm trying, Mama. Finally trying." Her phone lit up with Jamal's response. She read it 3 times, relief washing through tension she hadn't fully acknowledged. This could work. This partnership between worlds that weren't supposed to touch. Between the construction worker who'd learned to document injustice and the CEO who'd forgotten how to see it. Between a father fighting to save his daughter's childhood and a woman trying to honor promises made to ghosts. The city sprawled below her office windows, millions of lights representing millions of stories. Most would never intersect with hers. Most would struggle and survive, or struggle and fail, in patterns so familiar they'd become invisible to people with enough money to build glass towers above the grinding poverty. But maybe, just maybe, one intersection could create ripples that reached further than either of them could currently imagine. One birthday dinner interrupted could cascade into systemic change if they were smart enough and stubborn enough and willing to weather the storms that were definitely coming. Victoria opened a new email to Chambers, attached the foundation proposal, typed a single line. "Board meeting Wednesday. Come prepared to discuss this properly or tender your resignation. Either works for me." She hit send before doubt could intervene, then gathered her things and headed for the elevator. Tomorrow would bring consequences. Tonight, she'd sleep better than she had in years, knowing she'd finally started keeping the promise that mattered. 2 weeks transformed abstract possibility into concrete reality with velocity that left Jamal struggling to maintain equilibrium. The downtown office space Victoria had secured occupied the 8th floor of a renovated building 3 blocks from Sterling Technologies. Exposed brick and hardwood floors, and windows overlooking the harbor, the kind of workspace that announced serious investment rather than charitable impulse. Amanda Washington arrived on day 3, hired as Boston director with credentials that made Jamal wonder why someone with her experience would take orders from a construction worker. Master's degree in social work, 15 years managing programs for underserved communities, references that read like a who's who of nonprofit leadership. She shook his hand with grip that suggested she'd made peace with whatever doubts she might harbor about the arrangement. "Mr. Thompson, looking forward to building something meaningful." Her tone carried assessment underneath professional courtesy, cataloging him the way he'd seen hundreds of people do over the years, trying to reconcile the construction background with the executive title, the Dorchester address with the corner office, the viral photos with the foundation budget. "Just Jamal. And same. Let's help some families." The first applications arrived faster than their nascent systems could process. 12 families approved for emergency assistance in the first week, stories bleeding together into variations on familiar themes. Medical debt crushing single mothers working 2 jobs, eviction notices for fathers who'd lost hours when their children got sick, the grinding math of poverty where every small crisis cascaded into catastrophe because there was no margin for error when you lived paycheck to paycheck. Jamal read each application personally, recognizing his own story reflected in different configurations. The construction worker whose hand injury meant lost income and spiraling debt. The restaurant server whose car breakdown eliminated transportation to the job that barely covered childcare. The maintenance worker facing homelessness because his daughter's asthma medication cost more than the insurance he couldn't afford in the first place. Victoria appeared regularly, sometimes announced and sometimes not. She'd arrive with coffee and questions about operational challenges, diving into details with the same intensity she probably brought to acquisition negotiations. How are they tracking impact metrics? What systems existed to prevent fraud? Were they building sustainable processes or just throwing money at symptoms? During one of these impromptu sessions, Jamal pulled out the worn notebook he'd been carrying for 6 years. Pages filled with observations he'd never expected to share. Dates and locations, and the particular coded language that disguised discrimination as policy. 73 incidents cataloged in his careful handwriting, each one a small wound he'd documented because somebody had to remember. Victoria studied the notebook with intensity that made him self-conscious. This is investigator-level work, pattern recognition, data analysis. Just paying attention. Jamal shrugged off the compliment, writing things down so I wouldn't forget when people told me I was imagining it. These aren't isolated incidents. Victoria's finger traced down one page, tracking the timeline. This is systematic. Look, same restaurant group owns 4 of these locations. Same corporate structure. Same coded language training. She pulled out her phone, typing rapidly. I'm having my team investigate Bennett Hospitality Group more thoroughly. If they're running a coordinated exclusion strategy, that's federal civil rights territory. The casual way she deployed resources that would cost him years of salary felt disorienting, but watching her shift from emotional response to strategic planning revealed something about how she'd built her empire. Victoria Sterling didn't just get angry at injustice, she weaponized it. The board meeting arrived on Wednesday with the inevitability of weather systems tracked on radar. Jamal dressed in the suit Victoria had insisted on buying him, proper tailoring that actually fit, fabric that didn't wrinkle the moment he sat down. Standing in front of his mirror, he barely recognized the man looking back. Construction foreman turned foundation director, wearing clothes that cost more than his monthly mortgage payment used to be. Zara had helped him with his tie that morning, small fingers working through the steps he'd taught her. You look fancy, Daddy, like someone important. The observation landed heavier than she probably intended. I'm the same person I was yesterday, baby. I know, but now everyone else will see it too. The Sterling Technologies boardroom held 20 people arranged around mahogany that gleamed with a particular shine of furniture maintained by people paid specifically for that purpose. Robert Chambers occupied the power position at the far end, flanked by board members whose combined net worth probably exceeded small nations' GDP. Jamal took his seat beside Victoria, acutely aware of how his presence disrupted the room's demographic uniformity. 20 faces, 19 white, 1 him. The weight of representation settled on shoulders already carrying enough. Chambers opened without preamble, voice carrying barely contained fury. This emergency meeting was called to discuss Ms. Sterling's recent activities, which the board believes represent significant departures from established corporate strategy. Victoria's expression remained neutral. You mean the foundation? I mean the foundation, the Westbrook acquisition bid, and the rejection of the Hartwell merger. Chambers ticked items off on his fingers. Decisions made unilaterally without proper board consultation. I consulted the board on Hartwell. You recommended approval. I declined. 4,000 jobs, Victoria. 4 billion in shareholder value. 4,000 people losing their livelihoods, so we could report better quarterly earnings. Victoria's voice stayed level. I found that math unacceptable. Chambers' face flushed the particular red that came from authority being questioned in front of witnesses. This is a business, not a charity. We have fiduciary responsibilities, which I'm fulfilling by positioning Sterling Technologies for long-term sustainable growth, rather than short-term profit extraction. The argument escalated with practiced corporate language masking fundamental disagreement about what companies owed the communities they operated in. Jamal watched the dynamics, recognizing patterns from construction sites. Power plays disguised as procedural concerns, personal grievances wrapped in appeals to higher principles. The eternal dance of people protecting territory they considered theirs by divine right. Finally, Chambers turned his attention to Jamal with the kind of focused contempt usually reserved for particularly offensive insects. And this? A construction worker running a $50 million foundation. It's absurd. Silence fell across the room. Jamal felt 20 pairs of eyes shift to him, waiting to see if he'd defend himself or confirm their suspicions about his inadequacy. Victoria started to respond, but he raised a hand, stopping her. If he couldn't speak for himself now, he'd never earn the credibility this position required. Former construction foreman. Jamal kept his voice measured. Current Chief Community Officer of Sterling Technologies. And yeah, I know how it looks. Guy from Dorchester in a job usually reserved for people with Harvard MBAs and family connections. He stood, moving to the presentation screen Victoria had prepared. But here's what my background gives me that your usual candidates don't have. I know what it feels like when your daughter asks why you can't afford her birthday dinner. When medical bills pile up faster than paychecks arrive. When you're working 3 jobs and still falling behind because the system is designed to keep you underwater. Jamal pulled up the first slide, statistics on single-parent households in Boston. 38% of single-mother households live below the poverty line. Median income, $29,000. That's not a living wage in this city. That's survival mode. Next slide showed the foundation's first 2 weeks of impact. 12 families approved for emergency assistance, rent paid to prevent evictions, medical bills negotiated down, childcare costs covered so parents could keep jobs. These aren't statistics to me. These are people I recognize because I was them 2 weeks ago. Still would be without Ms. Sterling's intervention. He met Chambers' gaze directly. You want to question my qualifications? Fine. I managed construction teams of 40 workers, coordinated projects worth $30 million annually, made sure we came in on time and under budget while maintaining safety standards that kept people alive. I think I can handle distributing emergency assistance to families who need it. A younger board member spoke up, voice tentative. The foundation's metrics are actually quite impressive. 12 families helped in 2 weeks with minimal overhead costs. That's efficient deployment of resources. Efficient deployment of shareholder money on social engineering projects. Chambers wouldn't let it go. This isn't our mission. Our mission is whatever we decide it is. Victoria cut him off. And I'm deciding Sterling Technologies will be known for more than quarterly earnings reports. We'll be known for changing the communities we operate in. She stood, commanding the room with physical presence and absolute certainty. I built this company from nothing. Turned $8.4 billion from an idea and execution. I didn't do that by following conventional wisdom or accepting other people's limitations on what was possible. Her voice carried steel underneath the professional courtesy. The foundation isn't a distraction from our mission. It is our mission. Because companies don't exist in vacuum. They operate in communities, employ people, create impact beyond balance sheets. And when we ignore that impact, we become exactly the kind of soulless corporations everyone loves to hate. She placed both hands on the table, leaning forward. Jamal Thompson represents something this board desperately needs. Someone who understands what our policies look like from the other side. Someone who can tell us when our blind spots are hurting people. Someone who won't let us forget that behind every percentage point of market share are human beings trying to survive our optimization strategies. Chambers pushed back from the table. This is exactly the problem. You're making emotional decisions. I'm making strategic decisions informed by values this company should have embraced decades ago. Victoria's interruption carried finality. And if you can't support that direction, Robert, you're welcome to tender your resignation. I'm sure we can find board members who understand that long-term value creation requires more than cost-cutting and labor exploitation. The room went silent. Challenging a board chairman this directly violated every unspoken rule of corporate governance. But Victoria had always existed outside normal boundaries, building her empire through calculated risks others considered reckless. A third board member cleared his throat. Perhaps we should table this discussion and reconvene when everyone has had time to review the Foundation's complete proposal. The suggestion offered face-saving exit from confrontation spiraling toward irreconcilable conflict. Chambers seized it, standing abruptly. Agreed. We'll revisit this Friday. Come prepared with comprehensive analysis of financial impact and legal exposure. As the room emptied, several board members approached Jamal. Polite questions wrapped in assessment, testing whether he could navigate their world with sufficient sophistication to avoid embarrassing them. He answered with construction worker directness, translating Foundation goals into language they'd understand. Return on investment measured in families stabilized, community goodwill generating brand loyalty, positive press coverage worth millions in advertising equivalents. Walking back to Victoria's office afterward, Jamal felt exhaustion settling into his bones. 2 weeks of learning new systems while maintaining his construction shifts, of proving himself to people determined to see only deficits, of carrying the weight of representation for everyone who'd never get opportunities like this. You did well in there. Victoria's approval felt genuine rather than patronizing. Chambers still wants me gone. Chambers wants everyone gone who threatens his control. Don't take it personally. They reached her office, settling into chairs that probably cost more than his couch. Victoria pulled out her tablet, showing him the research her team had compiled on Bennett Hospitality Group. 73 complaints over 6 years, matching Jamal's notebook almost exactly. Corporate documents revealing systematic exclusion masked as customer preference optimization. This is bigger than one restaurant. Victoria's finger traced connections between corporations. Bennett Hospitality is owned by a real estate development group. Same group that's been gentrifying neighborhoods across Boston. Same group that's made political donations to zoning board members. She looked up, expression hardening. This isn't just business discrimination. It's coordinated social engineering, using service industry exclusion as part of larger strategy to push certain populations out of developing areas. Jamal's construction background suddenly clicked pieces together. The neighborhoods where these restaurants operate, they're all in areas being converted to luxury housing. Exactly. And if you make those neighborhoods feel unwelcoming to certain demographics, you accelerate the displacement process. Property values rise faster when the wrong people don't feel comfortable there. The scope of what Victoria was suggesting made Jamal's head spin. Not isolated incidents, but deliberate strategy spanning years and multiple industries. How do we prove that? We don't have to prove intent, just pattern and practice. Victoria pulled up federal statutes on her screen. Title II of the Civil Rights Act covers public accommodations. Department of Justice can investigate systematic discrimination. If we can document the pattern clearly enough, we trigger federal intervention. She met his eyes with intensity that suggested decisions being made in real time. But that means going public. Really public. DOJ investigations, media coverage, legal battles that could last years. Are you ready for that kind of scrutiny? The question demanded honesty he wasn't sure he possessed. Going public meant Zara's life becoming even more exposed, meant his financial history and every mistake laid bare for examination, meant becoming the face of something larger than himself, with no guarantee of success. I need to think about it. Talk to Zara. Of course, this affects her too. Victoria's phone buzzed with incoming message. She glanced at it, expression shifting. Your bank called. Foreclosure officially withdrawn. Mortgage current through next year. Relief and resentment warred in Jamal's chest. Grateful for the rescue, angry he'd needed rescuing, uncertain whether accepting help made him smart or weak. Thank you. Thank me by helping 847 families the way I helped yours. That's the deal. The number felt impossibly large, but looking at Victoria's absolute certainty, he almost believed they could reach it. Almost believed one construction worker and one billionaire could actually change systems designed to perpetuate exactly the kind of poverty they were trying to eliminate. His phone rang, the school again. Jamal's stomach dropped even before he answered. The principal's voice carried carefully neutral tone that school administrators use to deliver bad news with plausible deniability. Zara had been involved in another incident, not physical this time, but disruptive. Could he please come in to discuss appropriate consequences for repeated behavioral issues? Victoria was already gathering her things. I'm coming with you.
You don't have to. I'm coming. Zara defended herself because of something I started. That makes it my responsibility too.
They drove in Victoria's Mercedes, leather seats and climate control insulating them from the October cold settling over Boston. Jamal stared out the window, watching familiar streets slide past, wondering how many more times his daughter would pay prices for his decisions, for his pride, for his refusal to stay invisible the way poverty demanded. The principal's office felt smaller with Victoria in it, her presence commanding space that forced Mrs. Patterson to recalibrate her approach. Zara sat in the same plastic chair, but this time her expression held defiance underneath the fear. What happened? Jamal kept his voice gentle. Zara's answer emerged fierce and unrepentant. Madison said you were embarrassing me, that everyone was laughing at us because we're charity cases who don't know our place. So I told her exactly what I thought about people who judge other people by their money instead of their character. The phrasing echoed Victoria's words from Westbrook, 8-year-old synthesis of concepts she was still learning to articulate. Mrs. Patterson shifted uncomfortably, clearly recognizing that punishing a child for defending dignity created optics nobody wanted. Miss Thompson used language that disrupted the learning environment. The principal chose her words carefully. We can't have students shouting in class regardless of provocation. Victoria leaned forward, voice carrying the kind of polite menace usually reserved for hostile acquisition negotiations. And what consequences is Madison facing for her harassment? Because what you're describing sounds like systematic bullying enabled by administrative indifference. Mrs. Patterson stiffened. Both students have been disciplined appropriately. Define appropriately. Victoria pulled out her phone. Because I'm happy to discuss this with the school board, or the local news, or my legal team, whichever you think would be most productive. The threat hung in the air, unmistakable despite the courteous delivery. Mrs. Patterson's expression cycled through calculation before landing on diplomatic retreat. Perhaps we've been too quick to classify this as behavioral issue rather than bullying response. I'll speak with Madison's parents about ensuring their daughter understands the seriousness of her actions. Outside, Zara walked between them, small hand finding Jamal's and Victoria's simultaneously. Am I in trouble? No, baby. Jamal squeezed her fingers. You stood up for yourself. That's never wrong. But she's right that everyone's laughing at us. Zara's voice went small. The other kids, their parents, everyone. They all think we're charity cases. Victoria stopped walking, crouching to Zara's level on the sidewalk. Can I tell you something? When people laugh at you for accepting help, it's because they're scared. Scared that they might need help someday. Scared that the distance between their comfortable lives and your struggles isn't as big as they want to believe. She reached out, straightening Zara's brave pendant. Your dad didn't accept charity. He accepted partnership. We're building something together that's going to help hundreds of families. That makes him brave, not weak. And you're brave for defending him. Zara studied Victoria with 8-year-old seriousness, processing concepts too complex for her age, but understanding the emotional truth underneath. Are you going to keep being our friend, even when people laugh? Especially when people laugh. Victoria's certainty seemed to reach Zara in ways Jamal's reassurances hadn't. Friends don't disappear when things get hard. That night, after Zara finally fell asleep clutching her pendant, Jamal found Victoria still sitting on his porch. She had insisted on making sure they got home safely, then lingered in the way people do when they're avoiding going back to empty spaces. Thank you. For earlier. Jamal settled into the chair beside hers. Don't thank me. I dragged you into this visibility. The least I can do is help you weather the consequences. They sat in silence, watching Dorchester's nighttime rhythms play out on the street. Cars passing, neighbors returning from late shifts. The particular quiet of working-class neighborhoods where people were too tired for the kind of loud recreation wealthy areas considered entertainment. I've been thinking about your question. Jamal broke the silence. About going public with the DOJ investigation. About becoming the face of this. Victoria waited, not pushing. Zara's already paying prices I never wanted her to pay. Every day she goes to school, she's defending me against people who think accepting help makes us weak. Every time someone sees those viral photos, we become characters in their story instead of people living our lives. He paused, organizing thoughts that had been churning since the board meeting. But staying invisible didn't protect her either, didn't protect any of us. The system grinds people down whether they fight back or not. At least fighting back creates the possibility of something changing. So that's a yes? That's a yes. Jamal met her eyes. Let's document everything, build the case, trigger the federal investigation, and when it all blows up in our faces, at least we'll know we tried to change something instead of just surviving it. Victoria's smile carried understanding earned through similar calculations about risk and purpose. My board is going to lose their minds. Good. Let them. Maybe someone needed to remind them that companies are made of people, not just profit margins. She stood, gathering her things. I'll have my legal team start compiling the comprehensive documentation. This won't be quick. Federal investigations move at bureaucratic speed. We've got time, and 847 families counting on us to get it right. The number had become shorthand between them, representing not just quantifiable impact, but fundamental commitment to transformation. Victoria nodded, descended the porch steps, paused at her car. Jamal, what you said in the board meeting about recognizing those families because you were them. That's exactly why this works. Don't ever apologize for that perspective. After she left, Jamal sat alone on his porch, watching stars emerge through light pollution. Somewhere in the city, 73 families were living the same struggles he'd just escaped. Hundreds more would cycle through similar crises, ground down by systems designed to extract maximum value while providing minimum support. But maybe, just maybe, one construction worker and one billionaire could document those systems clearly enough to trigger change, could turn visibility into leverage instead of vulnerability, could prove that sometimes the most important qualification for fixing broken things was understanding exactly how they broke you. Inside, he checked on Zara one final time. She slept peacefully, brave pendant resting against her collarbone, small chest rising and falling with the particular rhythm of childhood dreams. Whatever storms were coming, they'd weather them together. And when the dust settled, maybe she'd inherit a world slightly less cruel than the one they currently occupied. That was worth fighting for, worth risking everything for, worth becoming visible for. The foundation office had been open exactly 18 days when the first threatening call arrived. Anonymous voice, careful not to make explicit threats that could be traced, but message clear enough. Stay away from Bennett Hospitality. This doesn't concern you. Stop asking questions you won't like the answers to. Jamal reported it to Victoria, who reported it to her security team, who reported it to Boston PD with the kind of authority that came from having lawyers on retainer. The detective who took the statement seemed unsurprised, suggesting this wasn't the first time Bennett had tried to silence critics through intimidation. 2 days later, Jamal's truck was vandalized at the construction site. Nothing overt: slashed tires, broken windshield, the word snitch spray-painted across the hood. Devin helped him file the police report, but both understood nothing would come of it. Property crime without witnesses rarely generated investigative resources. "You sure about this foundation thing, Jay?" Devin's concern was genuine. "People are clearly trying to send messages." "Yeah, I'm sure, which is exactly why they're trying to stop us." But that night, lying awake while Zara slept down the hall, Jamal wondered if he'd made catastrophic mistake, if his pride had endangered his daughter, if survival meant knowing when to stay invisible instead of insisting on being seen. His phone lit up with message from Victoria. "Saw the police report. Increasing security at the foundation office. Driver will pick up Zara from school until this settles. Non-negotiable." The offer should have felt like overreach. Instead, it felt like partnership. Like someone understanding the stakes and refusing to let him face them alone. He typed back, "Thank you, and I'm still in, whatever comes next." Her response arrived immediately. "Good, because we're just getting started."